There are many kibbutzes in Israel. They started in the 1910s and they still exist today. So they've been successful. Behind me is Ayelet HaShachar. It's interesting, I just realized that one of the Psalms starts out with Ayelet HaShachar. It's a musical instrument of sort. And this was a musical, lovely, lyrical place. The cool thing about it was that they had their community of kibbutzniks, and we had our community of foreigners. Well, being an American, that kind of put a bit of a target on your back. You know, people either love you or hate you for being an American. And the hippie culture seemed to be endemic of the United States, even though it was fed by some of the music from England. It was definitely an American phenomenon, which was really fed by the Vietnam War and the resistance to it. It was part of the big deal, and Woodstock was emblematic of that. However, I just want you to understand that when you got to the kibbutz, you hung out with the volunteers. It was a volunteer area. There were a few kibbutzniks that worked with you, those that were special, actually, like this Nina, who I told you about, who was really in charge of us. If you didn't work, she threw you out. So it was quite a lovely lyrical place, and I was enjoying myself. One of the things that I was getting into on the kibbutz, and I'm sitting still, is I was playing a North African recorder type flute that I picked up when I was in North Africa. And that became a big deal for me. I would be fluttering around and playing it, and people seemed to enjoy the music, so I kept on going with the music. From my journal, Sunday, 24 January 1971. Kibbutz, kibbutz, beautiful land, rolling hills, stoned. From the kibbutz, I want you to understand, we could see a place called Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is the tallest, greatest mountain in the area, and it would get actually snow on it. So here's a picture of Mount Hermon, and you can see that although the land below is green, because it doesn't get snowy below, and it stays, you know, it's kind of cool, but it's not cold in the rest of Israel. And to see it from a distance was quite incredible. So at one point, the kibbutzniks took us on a tour to Mount Hermon because it was so obvious that it was something you wanted to see. From my journal, Sunday, 24 January 1971. Up on Mount Hermon with snow and a truck full of freaks from the kibbutz. We see military presence in this area that juts into Lebanon. We can feel the tension. Yes, folks, it really was that way. With the military and with guerrillas coming into Israel from the north, there was a definite tension so thick you could cut it with a knife, as they say. But it became something you kind of got used to. In fact, the Israeli military presence was kind of cool because those folks would be likely to pick you up if you were hitchhiking. And they were all young people, about my age. So it really made for kind of an interesting interchange. And of course, here I am, this guy who had avoided the draft in the United States. And these young people were all subject to the draft. It was like automatic. You had to serve a couple of years. And it made for an interesting engagement with interesting young people who you could relate to, even though they often couldn't speak English and spoke Israeli Hebrew, that is. So as a wanderer, even though I'm spending some time in this kibbutz, I spent a lot of time checking stuff out. Whenever I got off work, I would go someplace, do something, hang out with people. And one of the cool features about Ayelet HaShachar, you can see it here, is here's the farm type area. Actually, that's the village kind of scale community we lived in. And of course, the farm is all around it. All that farmed area is Ayelet HaShachar. And then over to the east is the Jordan River. Now, this is the little stream of a Jordan River that flows from the north into the Sea of Galilee. We could walk over there, and it was quite lyrical. It was just a bit of a stream. So I write in my journal, down by the Jordan River with a couple of American friends, we anointed each other in the water of the Holy River. Yes, we kind of dreamed up things about feeling like, wow, this is just like what Jesus must have experienced, or what Moses had experienced. Well, Moses didn't live in Israel, but in those biblical days of yore. And we go on to say, we lit a beautiful fire by the flowing water of that ever-flowing eternal water. What a beautiful place. So what happened was we found some scraps of wood and a few things, and we thought, let's just build a fire. It was like a consecration. It was another kind of holy moment. Now, this is the Holy Land, and even though I haven't really talked about it before in terms of my week-by-week explanation of my journey, it was something we're starting to pick up on, is the fact that, hey, there's a lot of stuff that's happened in this Holy Land over thousands of years, literally. And it really was a fascinating concept to be able to be where Jesus had walked, where the other Israelites had walked in the days of yore, and you could feel the vibes of that. And it was really kind of neutered in a way by the kibbutz, because the kibbutzniks were not religious at all. In fact, they didn't even seem to be spiritual. So those of us foreigners, we were kind of picking up on the vibes perhaps more than the kibbutzniks. So we would go off and we would find the Jordan River, and we might go across the road to where the Chatzor was. There was a tell. It was one of the reasons why Yelet HaShachar had been built in this spot, because there's a water source. Of course, you can see the water source making all these beautiful fields of green and crops and things of that sort that were part of the communal farm that we were living in. The kibbutz gave me a chance to rest my weary road bones, because being on the road day after day, hitchhiking, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, that made for being very tired, really, in some way, kind of bone weary. And it gave me a chance to reflect and to think about, what the heck have I been doing for the last 3 or 4 months? How have I come to the point where here I am in Israel, and all the things that I've done, it made me think about it. Again, from my journal, I write 25 January 1971, kibbutz. Time marches on. After looking through my journal a bit and seeing all the fantastic experience that have gone by, I feel boggled and tired. Good night. Heavy trip. And it was a heavy trip, but this kibbutz experience again gives me the chance to reflect and to have an interesting time getting to know the kibbutzniks and the people from all over the world in this special community. While on the kibbutz, I start to get kind of spiritual, if you will. I wasn't brought up religiously, although I had a bar mitzvah as a kid. It wasn't something I did every week. My family was not religious. We identified as Jews culturally and perhaps blood-wise, but not really religiously. So I write in my journal, it's so heavy. I keep getting the feeling that the life I live is controlled from some other dimension. I feel the vibrations from somewhere else quite often. It's hard to pin down. It's a nebulous concept. It's too big. Day after day on the kibbutz, it's just living your life, spending some time, killing some time, really. I have been washing dishes and playing basketball for 2 days, I write in my journal. It's far out. I dig it. And again, I have this idea that I feel like I'm getting old. I'm 22 years old. I write in my journal, quote, I grow old. I grow old. Do I dare eat a peach? And this is a quote from T.S. Eliot from the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock that I learned while I was in high school. This idea of being old at 22 makes me laugh today at 72. But, you live your moments. Kids that are 5 years old feel like they've lived their whole life and they don't know what's ahead of them. They don't feel old, but they don't feel young either. They just live in the moment. And I was living in the moment, but I was feeling like I was aging and didn't know where I was going. And speaking of not know where I'm going, I started to think, well, I'm not going to stay here forever. When I get out of this kibbutz, what am I going to do? I knew I wanted to travel around Israel a bit and see it, experience it. And I started hearing about a place called Eilat. I had heard about it before because supposedly you could get work there. And I'm thinking, I got to start making some money somehow because I am basically broke at this point. My brother sends me a few dollars. My mom sends me a few dollars. But how am I going to make it? So I write in my journal, I now believe I will go to Eilat in the south of Israel on the Red Sea for a while to work and live. I can probably save a bit and pass some time if I dig the place at all, but I'll go see. I may wind up staying in this country for a while. I dig it a bit. And why not? Why not? I've mentioned it before to you folks. Why not becomes a philosophy. And it was enhanced by my relationship with a Dutch fellow by the name of Henk Dijk. Somehow or another, he and Trudy Doen, yes, that was their real names, Dijk and Doen, from Holland, the Netherlands, they came together in a small little car from Holland. Henk Dijk, I write, also gives me a humorous look at the picture concept, where he frames the situation and we laugh. So it means that all of a sudden I'd be with Hank and he became a big buddy of mine. I really enjoyed this guy. And we would be experiencing things and there'd be absurd things happening or something silly would happen. And all of a sudden Hank would go, look at the picture. And he would say it in his Dutch accent, but he spoke English pretty well. And it really was a crack up to me because he would point out things to me that were very funny. And by framing them with his famous expression, look at the picture, then I would look and we would laugh and laugh. Hank was a real pleasure. The cultures were merging with these Europeans and with the Israelis and became a very fun circumstance. As to his why not concept, which was a big Frank one, a big Hank one, why not? Try something, do something, find a reason to take a chance. A great road philosophy, though it could be somewhat dangerous, as we will see. Food, glorious food. Yes, food was a big deal in the kibbutz. I mean, this was a farm. I worked in the grapefruit area where I'd pick grapefruits from the trees and we would load them up in these big crates. And by the way, in case you don't know it, grapefruit trees are full of thorns. So you get beat up, cut up on your hands, you try to use gloves, but the grapefruits they had were fantastic. And they had this huge bin of them and you could take as many as you wanted. So you'd go and you pick 3 or 4. They were these wonderful pink grapefruits, big and very juicy. And you always had a couple in your room. And if you got thirsty at night or you got hungry at night, you crack open a grapefruit. So that made it a lot of fun. But again, the food is a big deal. So they had this big dining hall. And basically speaking, it was served by the kibbutzniks and the volunteers. And I write in my journal that this place has really got me flipped out. The people are so strange. Tonight I worked dinner. The tea wagon and soup were my terrain. So what you would do is they had these lovely wagons. They put all this food on them with ladles and things. And you go down the middle of the aisle and you'd serve people on both sides. Being a server was kind of a cool thing and I enjoyed that. The fun thing about it was that I started to learn about foods that I really didn't know anything about. One of the big deals was avocados. Now, I was not familiar with these things, but we had avocados growing on the kibbutz. And boy, the people that came from foreign lands who knew about avocados and could eat these specialty items, which in those days were very expensive. And people were going nuts. Oh my God, as many avocados as you wanted to eat? Well, I didn't really want to eat any of them, but I was learning to eat with these people. And again, it's the people who came from the foreign lands, us volunteers, who really were just flipped out by the fact that these avocados were basically limitless, all you wanted to eat, and they were rich and wonderful. The kibbutz had a paper, a newspaper. It was a small little, they call them rags. I don't mean it literally, but referred to by many people, the newspaper as being a rag. And they were interested in me because I was walking around wearing my jalaba, and I was obvious, and I had this wonderful curly red hair, and I was a Jew, so that was interesting. Most of the volunteers were not Jews, by the way. They came to Israel and they volunteered to spend some time because the kibbutzes were kind of famous for travelers to come spend some time. So I write in my journal again. Today I interviewed for the paper here. The reporter kept asking me questions about my Jewishness and my attitudes. Another kibbutz chick drew a cartoon of me. What a place. In the drawing, I am in my jalaba with long, springy hair and a long, stringy goatee, looking like a Chinese bard. A little preview of week 16. Week 15, again, was just hanging out in the kibbutz, and 16 is similar, but there will be some adventures that will enlighten you on. So stay tuned for another fancy week of having a ball in Israel and the kibbutz and being part of the volunteers who made the kibbutz work. I worked cleaning dishes all last week. This week I'm working up the tea and soup wagon as my terrain during lunch and dinner hours. I like the constant rotation of jobs amongst us temporary visitors. Right as I'm about to get bored doing a job, I get a new assignment. It keeps things interesting. I am interviewed by the kibbutz newspaper. The reporter keeps asking questions about where I came from, what am I doing in my travels, where do I go from here. He also asked me questions about religion, atonement, the Talmud, the state of Israel and politics, but I declined to offer up anything on those topics.